Well, Turkey's President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has said that Turkish forces are operating in Syria to end the rule of his Syrian counterpart, Bashar al-Assad.
We preached patience but could not endure in the end and had to enter Syria together with the Free Syrian Army. Why did we enter? We do not have an eye on Syrian soil. The issue is to provide land to their real owners. This is to say we are there for the establishment of justice. We entered Syria to end the rule of the tyrant al-Assad who terrorizes with a state of terror.
During a speech in Istanbul, Erdogan added that Turkey did not enter Syria for any other reason. Turkish troops and tanks rolled into Syria on August 24th with the stated goal of fighting Daesh and Kurdish militants. Syria has described Turkey's military deployment as an invasion. Damascus also accuses Ankara of supporting terrorist groups in Syria and turning a blind eye to terrorists crossing over the border. Crossing over to the United States, to Minneapolis, I'd like to welcome Mnar Muhawesh, editor-in-chief of MenPressNews.com. Thank you so much for being with us. What do you make of Erdogan's statement? It's a matter of course, prior to troops going into Syria, he had said that he's sending the troops to fight against the terrorists, to fight against Daesh. And now he's openly saying that the main reason, the one reason that they are inside of Turkey is to basically overthrow President Assad. What do you make of that?
Well, it's certainly not surprising that Erdogan is taking such an aggressive tone against Syria, especially in his use of his choices of terminology and calling Assad a dictator. Because I think it's almost laughable to even hear him say that, because Erdogan uses such terminology like dictatorship against Assad when Erdogan has literally transformed Turkey into an authoritarian state since he's taken office. But certainly that's, besides the point. Erdogan's agenda in Syria has been the same since day one, when Turkish intelligence was on the ground in 2011, funding and arming Syrian opposition along with the CIA. And throughout the crisis, Erdogan has played a really dirty game in arming and financing terrorists from al-Nusra and the FSA rebels alongside Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and the United States and other countries. Now, in addition to this, like you just mentioned, Erdogan has authorized an ISIS training ground in his own country, allowing ISIS fighters to cross into Syria. And so for Erdogan to send Turkish troops for the last 3 months or so to fight ISIS in key cities where the Syrian army is actually close to liberating, it's actually clear that Erdogan has no real intention to actually fight ISIS, but to empower them. This is the same strategy the United States has been using in its so-called war on terror in defeating ISIS. It's just about empowering the terrorist group for the main goal, which has been the same all along, to bring down the Syrian government and hand over Syria to terrorists to ultimately turn it into the next Afghanistan of the Middle East. But even looking beyond Assad here, this war, like any other war, benefits the military-industrial complex in which Turkey and the US are both participants in, and of course, control over Syria's oil and gas. And so for Erdogan to say that this has nothing to do with gas and oil, it almost makes me just laugh deep down inside. If Erdogan cared even just a bit about human rights or saving Syrians from a dictator, he wouldn't be allied in such a conflict that has created the largest refugee crisis in the past 100 years, and allying itself with major human rights abusers like Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and Israel. Apart from buying oil from ISIS for the past few years, even earlier this year, Erdogan has struck a historic deal with Israel, who has taken advantage of the Syrian crisis and expanded its occupation of the Golan Heights to extract oil and gas. And so we know now that Erdogan is striking deals across Iraq, across Syria, across Israel, and even in Egypt, all for the sake of oil and gas, because that's how Erdogan envisions Turkey to become this oil and gas transfer area for the European gas market. So I really think that that's the true impetus for this war.
Are you surprised, though, that he has come out directly and stating that? Is it possible that it's a sign of some frustration, perhaps desperation, especially when we see the situation starting to change, at least in Aleppo?
Absolutely. I mean, the Syrian army and Russia are actually making huge gains. They're actually about to liberate Aleppo from the terrorist groups that are there. And so we saw the same kind of action by the United States when the Syrian army was liberating more cities. The more cities they liberated, the more the U.S. began to funnel in weapons and financing to rebels. And then also it announced its so-called war on ISIS when it began to drone ISIS and those ground troops that Obama promised he would never send to Syria. It's the same tactic that these foreign powers are taking to really try to weaken the Syrian army while strengthening these terrorist groups. And whenever we hear a state official, head of state making these kinds of statements, it almost comes off as a voice of desperation, like they have no other chances left in the conflict.
Thanks so much for being with us, Ms. Mnar Muhawesh, editor-in-chief of MnPressNews.com out of Minneapolis.